Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to another Cube Tuesdays. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about running Snowlands in Cube. We're basically going to be going over the positive points and the negative points for replacing your basic lands for Snowlands. So the biggest difference with what we're suggesting here, rather than how you've seen them before in sets like Modern Horizons or maybe Kaldheim, is that rather than these being in the packs that your cubers are drafting, these are basically in your basic land section. Basically at the end of the draft, when everyone's got their deck, all the basic lands that they can pick from are snow basics. We're basically doing this because outside of like a set cube where you're trying to recreate the experience of something like Kaldheim or the experience of Modern Horizons, no one really has room for basic lands in their cube. Like, I'm not going to cut a ton of sweet cards to put in basic lands for people to draft. So again, this is basically the idea of your land station becoming snow basics rather than regular basics. So let's go over the plus points first, and it's actually very simple what the plus point is. It basically lets you run more cards. This is the biggest upside and the only one that actually really matters. We've had snow in a number of different sets, as I've mentioned, Kaldheim and Modern Horizons, but you can go all the way back to like Ice Age and this kind of stuff to pick cards from for your cube. But remember that these cards still are competing against every other card ever printed. They have to still be good to earn a place, even if they are good snow cards. So as it stands, there are only 4 snow cards that I currently run in my cube. I'll run through them first and then go through some ones that I've run previously. First up, we have Icehide Golem. It is a snow mana, which means you have to pay a snow mana to cast it for a 2/2 snow artifact creature golem. This is basically 1 mana for a 2/2. This is so good in aggressive decks, and it can also go in all of the aggressive decks. It can go in mono red, it can go in mono white. They all love 2 power and toughness for just 1 mana. Also, because those decks are primarily monocolored, you're not going to be running lots of dual lands, so this is very easy for this to come out on turn 1. This is even good if you're sporting something like an artifact aggro deck, like a Steel Overseer. Loves this card. It is a fantastic aggro creature and is a staple in any cube running Snowlands. Next up is Arkham's Astrolabe. It is again a snow mana, meaning you have to use a snow source to cast this, for an artifact that when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and then you can pay 1 generic and tap it to add 1 mana of any color. For anyone who's not seen this card played, this might look a bit underwhelming and a bit simple, but this card has been banned in Modern, Legacy, and Pauper. It's a 1 mana rock that draws you a card and fixes you for all your colors. This is a fantastic card for enabling splashing or even the multicolored decks in a cube. Next, we have Icefang Coatl. It is a blue and a green for a 1/1 snow creature snake with flash and flying. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and the Coatl has Death Touch as long as you control at least 3 other snow permanents. So to me, another copy of Baleful Strix is just another copy of Baleful Strix. I love both these cards, I love the value, they're just really, really solid creatures. In a 4/5 color deck, you probably won't be turning on that Death Touch quite regularly, but in like a 2, maybe splashing a 3rd color deck, you will turn it on most of the time. And at that point, it's all upside because you've already drawn your card, you've got your value from it straight away. The 4th and maybe 4.5 card that I'm running in my cube that cares about snow is Into the North. This is 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets you search your library for a snow land and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So in most cases, if you're running snow basics, this is just another copy of Rampant Growth. Rampant Growth is a fine card even in most powered cubes. You would generally want to mana dot most of the time because of the way it interacts with things like Natural Order, but there is a special case in snow cubes where Into the North is very good. And that is the case that this goes and tutors up Dark Depths, which is specifically a legendary snow land. It's a very nice bonus on a card that's base level is just Rampant Growth, which is very cube playable in my opinion. So those are the 4 that I am still running in my cube. There are 3 others that I've run in the past that I'll go through now. Next, we have Dead of Winter. This is 2 and a black for a sorcery that says all non-snow creatures get -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the number of snow permanents that you control. Outside of the creatures and the Astrolabe that we've already mentioned, most of your snow permanents in a deck are going to be in basic lands. This is a very nice, very solid little board wipe. It gives the control decks another option for a board wipe. What I like about it is that it's not an auto-include for the 3/4 color control decks, which can get out of hand just by running too many good cards. And that's because primarily you need the basic lands in play to play Dead of Winter to make it really good. If I'm honest, I ended up cutting this just because I wanted to cut a board wipe in black. And of the ones available, I think this is probably like the 4th best. So in mine, I'm still running Toxic Deluge, Damnation, and the Mehut Massacre. I would put those 3 all above Dead of Winter, even though it's easier to cast than Damnation and the Mehut Massacre. This is one I will probably cube with again. Maybe if aggro gets a bit too good in my cube, I can use it as a lever to keep that under control. Next up on ones I've tested and cut is On Thin Ice. It is a white for a snow enchantment aura that says enchant snow land you control. Whenever On Thin Ice enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until On Thin Ice leaves the battlefield. So this is a perfectly fine removal spell. It requires you to have a basic in land, and then it's a 1 mana Oblivion Ring. That is pretty solid. It is weak to Strip Mine, which you do have to consider when playing this, because if they remove the land, then the enchantment goes. But when we were playing this, we found that wasn't actually the end of the world. This got cut for me when Planar Disruption got printed. because basically that's one more mana for a similar effect, but it can also turn off the Planeswalker, which is something I want, and that's really worth it. Basically, on Thin Ice got power crept out, but it is still a fine card. Then lastly, the other card I tested was Redain, God of the Worthy. It is 2 and a white for a legendary creature god. With flying, vigilance, and snowlands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped, and non-creature spells your opponents cast with mana value 4 or greater cost 2 generic more to cast. There is a backside, but that's not really super important. The main reason why this got cut is it's actually very, very strong and very, very miserable. This card is actually just really mean. If you play this early, your opponents will just be so far behind for the rest of the game. This got cut because it punishes people for playing snow basics. This punishes people for just playing basic lands. That's not really something that I wanted in my cube environment. There is definitely an argument that in kind of like the Mitgo Vintage Cube, if they were doing snow basics, this would get in there. Because in those kind of environments, you're fighting against actual power. If you have the most broken cards in all of Magic, then Redain probably actually does get in there. But for me, because mine is just below that power level, I cut it again because it was actually too good. There are obviously tons of other cards from multiple sets that care about Snowlands, but these were the ones that I have run, and these are the ones that I would recommend people testing if they wanted to go with the Snow Basics. These are the ones that actually can kind of compete against everything else that Magic is doing. So the positives are that you can run a bunch of the cards that we've just gone over. Let's go over the negatives now. So I say this every time, but whenever you introduce something into a cube that's out of the ordinary, you need to explain that to your players before the draft. That might not sound massive, but it is a negative. You've already got plenty of other things to worry about as a cube designer or as someone organizing a cube draft. Do you have your pod? Do you have your 6? Do you have your 8? Has everyone shown up? Who's running late? Did the pub take your booking? These are all more regular things that you'll be worrying about on the day of a cube. And it's happened to me before. I've just completely forgotten to do the pre-cube spiel of all the stuff people need to be aware of. And then a new player has been kind of like, oh, are Snowlands in this? It's like, yes, apologies. Again, it's not massive, but it is still a negative. The next point might be bigger or smaller depending on basically you, but your art is very limited. You can't run your favorite basic lands. You can only pick from a very small number of Snowlands that have been printed. And what's annoying is all the ones with the really cool art are very, very expensive. One of the cool things about owning a cube is that you can make it your own. You can run cool arts. You can run different varieties of cards that you want. You can pick individual cards from the secret layer if you like the artwork. And not having that option with your lands is something that you need to consider. Like if I wasn't running snow, all the basics in my land would be Urza Saga's lands, like the ones behind me, because I love them and they're really cool. But by running snow basics, I don't have that option. The other thing with picking your favorite lands is you already might own a bunch of them. Maybe they're in your commander decks, maybe they're in your draft kit, something like that. Which brings us on to our next negative. You actually have to go out and buy all these snow basics. There was a time after Modern Horizons and Kaldheim where they were like 10, 30p each. But we are a few years after that now, and every set till their next printing means they will go up in price. For my cube that regularly gets 8 people but can go up to 12, I have 40 of every basic land available to me. I was pretty lucky because I bought all mine around the time of Modern Horizons and Kaldheim. Even some of my playgroup donated me some because they knew I was after them to make the basic lands in my cube work. But if you were starting from scratch, if this was something that you wanted to add to your cube, it is a cost. You're probably going to be spending more on the basic lands for the cube than you are on the good cards that you can run because of running snow basics. So with the positives and the negatives out of the way, it brings up the question, should you do it? Should you go out there and run snow basics in your cube? This is a tricky question. Like I said with Cogwork Librarian last week, the thing I like about snow basics is that it gives me access to more cards. It gives me more magic. It gives me more things I can do with my cube, which as a cube designer, I like. And I like an environment that allows me to have more cards in it. I think especially cards like Icehide Golem and Arcum's Astral Blade are just really good. I think these can go in any power level of cubes. They are just very, very solid cards. But if I'm being super honest with myself and with you, if I were starting from scratch, I am not sure I would do it right now. I do believe the most optimal cube environment does run snow basics because it gives you access to these additional cards. I think a lot of the time, especially in other formats, things like Commander, things like Canadian Highlander, snow basics are probably just the way to go. That doesn't mean I do it in Commander because all my snow basics are in my cube. I'm not going to go out and buy more just for a Commander deck. So at time of recording, to get enough basic snowlands to provide for an 8-person cube pod, you're probably looking at about between 60 quid or $60. And that does not include shipping because you're going to have to be getting these from multiple different vendors because a lot of vendors don't have 40 of each snow basics anymore. That is very cost prohibitive. I can't sit here honestly and tell people to go out and do this for every single cube that they do. Because I'm fortunate enough to have them already, I'm not going to cut snow basics from my cube anytime soon. And this does feel like a bit of a downer of a way to end a video. Apologies for that. The plus side is that we will probably go back to Kaldheim at some point. There'll probably be something like a Modern Horizons or another ancillary set that has a load of snow basics in it. At that point, when they come down in price, it is definitely something to consider at that point, just picking up enough for your draft pod if you want to run these cards. Also, if we do go back to Kaldheim, there in theory should be a load more snow cards for us to consider running, and then the pros of that argument become a bit easier. There is one last point I want to touch on before we get out of here, And in theory, you can just tell all your players all the basic lands are snow, even though the actual lands they're running are not. So you can say Arkham's Astral Blade taps for a basic, or Icehild Golem taps for a basic. This is fine, but I would only recommend it in a playgroup that is very established and you have the same people coming every single time. If you're having new players, it could really mess them up. And at that point, it is 100% something you need to remind people of every single time you draft your cube. I can't say that is a solution for everyone, but it is maybe a way you can test out some of these cards like Icehild Golem and Arkham's Astral Blade to see if it is something that you want to include, see if it's something that you want to invest in for the future. But anyway, that is going to do it for the video. Do let me know down in the comments if you run snow basics in your cube or if you play with them in a cube. Do you like them? Do you like the cards that it allows you to run in a cube? Or importantly, are there any that I've missed that you really like? Do let me know, it'd be really good to see them. But anyway, until next time, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.